So what's going on guys, Kate is here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the top 3 best mutator dungeon builds in New World. So first things first, I will give you 3 specific builds, one for healers, one for tanks and one for DPS. And for each one of them I will explain what attributes and perks you want to have, then what gems and gear you want to use to get out your stats as much damage, healing or defensives as possible. Then as well I will show you the best gameplay of me using different weapons, so you would know which abilities you want to use first on your enemies and much more. And just before we start, this video is only meant for max level 60 players who have 600 item score gear, because in this build guide I will be explaining all the different coatings, enchantments and potions you need to use. Then as well for each dungeon you will have to use different gems and many more cool things like that. So if you are the elite of the elite New World players and you want to complete the hardest ever mutator dungeons, then with all this said, let's get right into it. So then moving over to the first build, which is made for tanks, and for your weapons we go with the sword and warhammer. And then these are the attributes you want to have. So like you can see, you want to get 300 strength and 200 constitution. And by just having 600 item score gear, you will get really close to these numbers. So depending on which attribute you need, use plus 40 constitution food or plus 40 strength food. And then last but not the least, for your gear you want to go with full heavy armor and you have to use a shield as well. So then for our first weapon, we have the best tanking weapon, aka the sword with shield. And then these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And as this video is specifically made for only max tier players, so I won't be going in detail about which perks you should unlock first, because you have to get all of them before even thinking about using this weapon. So then let's move over to the second weapon, which is the warhammer. And these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And of course at any time you're feel free to pause the video to copy these exact perks. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay where I'll show you the best way to play this build. So then for our first weapon we have the sword, and the first Q spell is called the Whirling Blade that deals 145% weapon damage to all enemies in 2 meter range, and each hit reduces your cooldowns by 10%. Then the second ability is called the Reverse Stab that stabs your target in 175% weapon damage, and most importantly you can't get interrupted, and on a successful hit all of your cooldowns get reduced by 25%. And then lastly the third ability is called the Defiant Stance, which you can activate, and for the next 8 seconds your resistance and threat level is increased. So this will mean that in 8 meter range all the mobs will only focus on attacking you. And this is the most important ability that basically this build is made around. So then moving over to the second weapon, which is the warhammer, and the first Q ability is called the Armor Breaker, which when using makes your character do a powerful swing which penetrates 35% of all the target's armor and deals additional damage. Then the second ability is called the Wrecking Ball, which strikes the ground with your warhammer, dealing 130% damage and flattening your target. And then lastly the third ability is called the Shockwave, and when using this spell it will give us the ability to slam down the hammer and create a small earthquake, and all targets standing in it will get stunned for 2 seconds. So then the way you want to use this build for mutated expeditions is to first of all remember your main job as a tank, which is to keep all the enemy attention on you, while at the same time trying to deal as much damage as you can. So what you want to do is first of all use your Defiant Stance, and while blocking make all the mobs target you. Then when this ability runs out, use your Whirling Blade, and then right after use the Reverse Stab. And by around this time you should have back your Defiant Stance. Because of all of our cooldown reduction we have selected on our weapon, so use it again, and then after the second time now switch to the warhammer. And first of all on grouped up mobs use the Shockwave and then Wrecking Ball, and then right after use the Armor Breaker, and this will stun, flatten and penetrate the mob's armor, which will make them weak and increase all of your team's damage. And then from here, whenever you can, keep on using heavy attacks in the blocking system. The main goal for this build is at the beginning of the fight get twice your Defiant Stance, which will keep all the mob attention on you. And then afterwards use your warhammer for AoE damage and debuffs to the enemy, and that's about it. So now for my last and final conclusions for this build. The sword and warhammer weapon combination right now is super strong in hardcore expeditions as a tank role, because you can survive for very long and make all the mobs target you. you, so the rest of your team can deal bunch of damage. And then lastly, for our gem choice for the sword and warhammer, you want to use the carnelian taunt gem. Then for all of your gear, depending on which dungeon you do, you want to use the ruby, amethyst, amber or the aquamarine gem. Before every dungeon it will tell you what type of mobs you are fighting against. So for example, in the Hellfire series dungeon, which is released in the first week, you want to get the protection against fire damage. Then in Eternal series, you want to protect yourself against void damage and so on and so forth. And then lastly, for your jewelry, you always want to use the diamond gems for all the dungeons. And then on top of all this, don't forget to bring gemstone dust and powerful oak flesh palm. Then of course the honing stones and infused corrupted coating, depending on which dungeon you are doing. If you are a max tier player, you should be familiar with these enchantments, but in any case I would recommend to always have them in your inventory. And then on your quick use bar you want to use the gemstone dust, healing potions, regeneration potions and powerful oak flesh palm. And then the rest things are in the inventory, which you use once right after entering the dungeon. And then last but not the least, to find out the best weapon and gear perks, watch this video, which is titled "Which weapon and gear perks are the best for your build?" You can find the link in this video description or just scroll through my channel. And in that guide I will explain how perks work and which ones are the best for PvE. So what are you waiting for? If you want to use the best tanking builds for mutated expeditions, then try this one out and have fun. So then moving over to the second build, which is the strongest DPS setup, and for the weapons we want to use the Void Gauntlet and Ice Gauntlet. And these are the attributes you want to have. So again, even before thinking about trying one of these dungeons, get your intelligence to 300 and then the rest 200 points put in constitution. And just by having 600 item score gear, you will get really close to these numbers. So don't forget to use the attribute food to reach this total of 500 attribute points. And then depending on how much points you already have, use either way plus 40 constitution food or plus 40 intelligence food. And then lastly, for your gear, you want to go with the medium category. And the best gear setup is to have heavy helmet, heavy chest armor, medium gloves, light pants and medium boots. And this will give you 22.9 kg weight, which is exactly just below the heavyweight category. So then moving over to the first weapon, which is the Void Gauntlet, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And then for the second weapon, we have the Ice Gauntlet, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And as you can tell, you want both these weapons with the max level 20. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay, where I'll show you the best way to play this build. So first of all, for the Void Gauntlet, we have the first Q ability called the Void Blade, which turns your weapon into a dagger that you can use as a melee weapon. And each hit increases your damage and reduces the enemy's damage absorption by 5%. Then the second ability is called the Oblivion, which creates a circle around you, and you and your teammates inside a circle will be getting 20% damage increase. But on the other hand, your enemy standing in the circle will be taking void damage every second. And a really nice thing to do is while standing in the circle, do a bunch of medium jumps. And because of the perks we have selected, we and any other allies in the circle will be getting plus 15 stamina each jump. So this will give us the ability to dodge more enemy attacks and gain more stamina at the same time. And then lastly, we have the third ability called the Orb of Decay, which shoots this orb that inflicts reduced damage absorption to the enemy. And then later that orb will come back and heal you for a few seconds. And on top of all this, if you hold the right mouse button, you can regain more mana, but in exchange your HP will go down. I would only recommend to use this mechanic if you really are at full health and your mana potions are on cooldown, so then use it for a second or two and you should be good to go. But for non-healer builds, you should only use it very rarely. So then for the second weapon, we have the Ice Gauntlet, and your Q spell is called the Ice Storm, which all enemies standing in it will get damaged and slowed. And the more enemies you hit, the higher damage you will get. Then the R ability is called the Ice Shower, which when using will create an ice wall, and if the mobs go through it, it will stun them. And this ability is very useful in trapping your target. And then lastly, the third ability is called the Ice Spikes, which when activating creates the trail of spikes in a straight line, which deals damage in AoE range. And if the target is below 30% health, a lot of times you can one-shot him. This ability is very useful and high damage if you use it correctly. And the way it works is that when you use the ability, but if you're too close to the enemy, the ice spike won't explode with the highest damage possible. So what you want to do is when using this ability and you see that the enemy is 1 second away from getting hit, use the right mouse button and this will detonate the spike, which will deal very high damage. So then, as far as your ability combinations go for the Ice Gauntlet, when in the Mutator dungeon, the best thing to do is place the Ice Storm, aka the Q ability, on grouped up enemies. And if you see an enemy stunned, then use the Ice Spike ability and do a bunch of damage. Or another way to set up your Ice Spike ability is to run into the enemy and place the Ice Shower spell, and if the enemy touches the ice wall, he will get stunned. So then use the Ice Spikes and it will be easier to hit the target. And then switching over to the Void Gauntlet, and first of all you want to place the Oblivion ability on ground and then activate your Void Blade and keep on using light or heavy attacks till the ability runs out. And then lastly use the Orb of Decay on grouped up mobs, and that's about it. So then for my last and final conclusions for this build. This Void Gauntlet and Ice Gauntlet weapon combination is very high damage and it is the best mage DPS build for PvE. So then for our gem choice for the Void Gauntlet you want to get the Opal gem, then for your Ice Gauntlet get the Malachite gem, and then for all of your gear, like I already explained, depending on the dungeon, use one of these 4 gems. And then lastly for your jewelry, always use the diamond gems. Then not to repeat myself again, but don't forget to bring gemstone dust, then the powerful oak flesh palm, then of course the honing stones and infused corrupted coating, depending on which dungeon you are doing. And then on your quick use bar you want to have the healing potions, regeneration potions, mana potions and the powerful oak flesh palm. And then put the rest of your things in your inventory, which you can use once right after entering the dungeon. And then on top of all this, like I already explained in the first build, to find out the best weapon and gear perks, watch this video, which you can find the link in this video's description or just scroll through my channel. So in a quick summary, if you're looking for the best DPS build for Mutator expeditions, then this is the one for you, so enjoy! So then moving over to my last and final one, which is the best healer build. And for the weapons we want to use the Live Staff and Void Gauntlet, and these are the attributes you want to have. So like you can see, you want to have 300 focus and 200 constitution. And like in the previous builds, to get even more attribute points, you want to use the plus 40 constitution food or plus 40 focus food. And lastly for your gear, you want to again go with the medium category. And the best gear setup is heavy helmet, heavy chest armor, medium gloves, light pants and medium boots. So then moving over to the first weapon, which is the Void Gauntlet, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And now let's go over to the second weapon, which is the Live Staff, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And as I've said previously, to use these builds and the weapons, you want to have the max level 20 and 600 item score gear. Okay, so then let's go over to the gameplay where I'll show you the best way to play this build. So first of all, for the Void Gauntlet we have the first Q ability called the Void Blade. And after activating, you basically get a Void Dagger, which you can use like any other melee weapon. And by using auto attacks, not only you will do a lot of damage, but as well reduce your enemy's damage absorption. Then the second ability is called the Oblivion, which creates the circle around you, and you and your teammates inside the circle will get plus 20% damage increase. And then lastly we have the third ability called the Petrifying Scream, which unleashes the scream that staggers and roots your enemies in front of you. And then lastly, if you hold the right mouse button, you can regain more mana, but in exchange your health will go down. This is by far the only build that I would recommend to use this mechanic. So if you're standing in your own healing circle and you really need more mana and your mana potions are on cooldown, then hold the right mouse button for a second or two and you should be good to go. So then for the second weapon, we have the Live Staff, and your Q ability is called the Sacred Ground, which you have to point and select the area you want to place it in, and then cast it for a split second. Then the R ability is called the Light's Embrace, and it basically works the same way just for a single target. And then lastly we have the F ability, called the Orb of Protection, that shoots this light projectile that grants fortify and healing in 3-meter radius. So this build's main objective is to heal your teammates, but at the same time support them with extra damage increase. So the way you want to use this build is first of all use your Life Staff and use all the 3 healing spells. I prefer to use the Sacred Ground ability first and then the Light's Embrace ability. and this way my healing is increased by 50% for all the allies that are standing in the circle. And as well, with the low Light's Embrace cooldown, I can basically spam it every 2-3 seconds. And then usually on tank, I use the Orb of Protection to heal them and give them more defensives. And then when your teammates call out to give them extra damage, then switch to the Void Gauntlet and use the Oblivion spell and give them extra damage. Then if you want to deal damage yourself from range, then use your life staff with light attacks. Or on the other hand, if you are farming mobs or the mobs aggro on you, then while still using the Void Gauntlet, activate the Void Blade spell and turn your ranged weapon into a melee weapon, and keep on using auto attacks plus the Petrifying Scream, and this will stagger and root your enemies while you're doing bunch of melee damage, and that's about it. So then for my last and final conclusions for this build. This Void Gauntlet and Life Staff weapon combination is very strong and is definitely the best meta healer build. And lastly, for the Void Gauntlet and Life Staff, you want to use the Diamond Gem. And then for all of your gear, depending on which dungeon you want to do, you want to use one of these 4 gems. And then lastly, don't forget of course all the tips and tricks I said in the first 2 builds. And then for all of your jewelry, get the Diamond Gems. Then not to say the same things again, but don't forget to bring Gemstone Dust, then the powerful Oak Flesh Palm, then of course the Honing Stones and infused Corrupted Coating. And then on your quick use bar, you want to have the Healing Potions, then the Regeneration Potions, Mana Potions and powerful Oak Flesh Palm. And then the rest things are in your inventory, which you can use once right after entering the dungeon. So then on top of all this, to find out the best weapon and gear perks I explained in depth, watch this video, which is titled Which Weapon and Gear Perks Are the Best for Your Build. You can find the link in this video's description or just scroll through my channel. So in a quick summary, if you are looking for the best healer build, but you want to still do a lot of damage, then this is the build for you, so have fun. And that's about it. So I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback or other good PvE builds that you would like to see in the next video, then feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you wouldn't miss any more amazing content from me. With all this said, you have an amazing day and I'll catch you in my next video, so take it easy, peace.
Yo, I ain't here for